So you don't know how to code and you suck at math. So how the heck are you ever going to get started with this whole quant trading thing? That's what we're going to talk about today on episode 11 of the Independent Quant podcast. I'm your host and founder of the Independent Quant, Luis, and I am not a financial advisor, or am I providing any type of actual financial advice on which markets to trade. Any trades that you take are your own. No guarantee of success or profit is implied through any of this podcast. But with that, let's jump right on in. How the heck are you going to get trading if you don't understand how to code and how to do mathematics, right? So specifically statistics, which is a big part of quantitative trading. Now, to kind of catch everyone up and kind of send a framework as to what is it that I mean by quantitative trading. So here at the Independent Quant, I'm very general with how I define quantitative trading. A quant is typically a professional that uses historical market data, or historical data at this point is not limited just to the market, and then creates statistical models to find an edge on how to trade and develop profitable strategies that adhere to some type of risk management profile for a company or for themselves. That is typically what a quant is, but I take a much more liberal approach to that definition, which is if you're using systematic trading, rules-based trading, and you definitely qualify to be calling yourself a quant. But the additional point that I make there is algorithmic. Now, you don't need to be an algorithmic trader to be a quantitative trader. You can use quantitative strategies to simply find signals and opportunities in the market, and then you making a judgment call yourself and as to whether or not you're going to make those trades. Here at the Independent Quant, I'm assuming that you are wanting to build an algorithmic trade desk, which is really what this project is all about, is helping you build an algorithmic trade desk by watching me build my own. But the algorithmic piece is the large part. So that's what quantitative trading is, and that's the framework for our conversation today. So getting started with that whole process when you don't understand how to math and code, the coding part, we'll start there. That's obviously the more obvious and more challenging one, because we're talking about running algorithmic strategies, which obviously run with algorithms, which are at least written with code. So how do we get over that hump? There's a lot going on today that actually lowers that learning curve. There's a lot of platforms out there that are using low code or no code for you to be able to develop your strategy and to do backtests for that strategy. I'm not going to mention any in this podcast because they seem to be turned over fairly quickly here at the time when I did the research for these. I haven't personally used any myself, but a simple Google search or asking generative AI what good resources there are to do that is a great first start as to getting your feet wet in there and addressing that need of being able to code and generate a strategy, or is to have it point you to a low code or no code solution. So with that, now that we've discussed how to address the coding piece, how do we address the math piece, right? Well, the math piece, you can use visual tools to be able to learn those quantitative concepts. There's, again, a lot of software out there that will let you do that. I'm not going to recommend any off the top of my head here. I'm not sponsored by anybody, and that's not the reason why I'm not doing it. It's the internet, and I just want to give this podcast more legs than what it has. I personally haven't used any of those tools either, but they are available out there for you. So far it sounds like I haven't been as helpful, but that's because the one tool that I think will play the most critical part for someone that doesn't know math and code, aside from the ones that I just mentioned, is generative AI. Using large language models like ChatGPT or Copilot or anything else that's out there, I think should be the first go-to, right? Even from those other platforms that I just mentioned that provide you an opportunity to do code or low code or no code, or do visual stuff, I think, in my opinion, yes, there's a place for those. But for us who are trying to be professional quantitative traders and trade our own accounts and have a robust method with which to do that with, I think we need to have full understanding and control of what it is that we're developing. And I think using a low code, no code solution hides too much for us. At least it does for me. Obviously, each of you will have your own opinion on this, but I have a hard time putting my hard-earned money at risk using something where I don't quite understand what's going on. And to be perfectly transparent with you, if you all have heard my story on some of the other podcasts that I've done here, is I started coding my own strategies in 2019, the summer of 2019. By the late fall of 2019, I was leasing out strategies, none of which I knew how they actually worked. I just saw their metrics and thought they were within my risk profile, so I started using them. Eventually had one that lost 10% of my account in an afternoon. That forever changed how I approached just this whole algorithmic trading thing. In all fairness, I don't blame the algorithm itself and me not knowing how the algorithm worked. I think there was a computer malfunction on my home computer that caused the algorithm to, well, it caused the computer to go to sleep, which then caused the algorithm to stop working. So the logic stopped running. So not really the algorithm's fault, not really, me not knowing what the algorithm was doing. I can't blame it on that. However, not knowing when it should have gotten out of the trade or how it was actually working was not, I don't think was good risk management on my part, right? So because of that is why I share that I think it's for you to be a professional quantitative trader, you can start not knowing how to code because generative AI, which I'm going to talk about here in a few, it's going to grant you the resources to learn how to code. And if anything, if you don't really want to learn how to code, you can treat generative AI as your software engineer for hire and have it develop things for you and then ask it to verify what it just provided you, right? And given that, now you're learning how code works, but you're also learning what it is that you're actually going to go implement and verifying that the code that you're getting is actually what you wanted. So with that, all right, so now we're saying generative AI, that's, I think I've stomped my foot hard enough on that one, that is the present and the future as to how develop these strategies if you're newer to the algorithmic trading space. But it doesn't really answer, well, where the heck do I get my strategies from? Well, for that, you can, another internet search. These strategies are readily available everywhere. I've delved into where you can find some of them. But if you have nowhere to start, this one I definitely have no problem sharing and saying, hey, I still go to the site for quality information. That's Investopedia. So think Wikipedia, but with an Investo instead of a wiki. Investopedia. Not sponsored by them at all. They do offer courses like we do. They do offer trading academies and all that. What they have a very robust platform on is a lot of education, a lot of great articles that I still reference. They'll have a lot of different strategies available there, very simple strategies, which I think is what someone who doesn't know how to code or has low code, wants to use a low code solution can use. But if you're going to go the generative AI route, same thing. You can even ask generative AI, hey, what are 3 simple strategies that I can use? Either using that route or Investopedia. You can start with really simple ones. If you really wanted to get started with it, you could say moving average crossovers. That is a trend following strategy. It has entry and exit conditions dependent on what we call a fast moving average. That's a moving average that is looking back, let's say, a time period that's less than the other moving average, which is a slow moving average. Let's say you have a 5 and a 50. So one moving average is a simple moving average looking at the last 5 periods, and the other one is a 50 period moving average where it's looking at the last 50 closes to determine what the average close price was, and it plots these on the chart for you. These are good strategies because they're nice and simple. They're not necessarily great strategies right out of the box, but that's what we're talking about right now. We're talking about how can we just find these strategies. We'll get a little bit more into how to refine these strategies a little later in the podcast. Another simple strategy is the RSI indicator, the overbought or oversold. You can go, hey, if RSI is above a certain figure, you're going to short. If it's below a certain value, then you're going to buy. That's simple enough. Again, that's not enough to build the entire strategy off, but it is a start. Breakout trading, this is looking at momentum trading. This gets a little more complicated because you're now looking for those levels where price is broken through and changed the nature of the market. Maybe it was a market that was going sideways and now it's breaking to the upside, or it's breaking to the downside, being a bearish market. You can jump in and exploit that. That's still considered a simple strategy, but of the three that I mentioned, that's definitely I think programmatically the more challenging to try to code. So what you can do is probably start with the moving average one. That's fairly simple. Then try your hand at an RSI one, and then kind of challenge yourself a little more. Start doing a breakout strategy. All again using with generative AI, whichever one you choose, be that ChatGPT or Copilot or whatever one that you've taken a liking to. Just understand that some are better than others. I'm not here to comment as to which ones are the best or not. I personally use ChatGPT extensively for not just my coding, but also just to run my business in general. I run a couple ideas past it. So if you had nothing better to choose, I'd say, ChatGPT. You don't even have to pay. Just use the free version. That's a great start. Not sponsored at all by ChatGPT or OpenAI, but if you needed to get started, that's where I get started. Now, the next part is you're going to have to understand data-driven trading, because that's what you're stepping into. Yeah, so you've got the code portion of this, but you also have the math portion. The purpose of the math portion is that it is creating a model or taking the data that's coming into it, making calculations and determining some type of signal, right, that you're going to use for entry, and then some other type of signal that you're going to use for an exit. So in order to do that, it's got to be looking at some type of data. So the quickest path to that would be using the data that's coming into your broker's platform, market data. I'd say, you're on the newer side of the quant trading spectrum, so limit yourself to market data. Don't start looking at alternative data sources, which is social media, using financial data such as the annual reports or anything that the company is producing to report its state and financial statements and all that. Stay away from that stuff, at least for now. We're talking about getting started in quantitative trading. That gets a lot more complex. Just look at market data. Best and simplest way to simplify market data is using technical indicators. Now, this may or may not be within the realm of quantitative trading. Like I've mentioned in other podcasts, for myself, as I grow as a quantitative trader, I'm coming from the technical analysis world. Technical analysis has been my go-to trading method systematically, but my go-to trading method for the last 9 years. And a lot of the strategies that I'm coding now are strategies that are technical analysis based. I mean, they've been that for the last 6 years. I mean, from 2019, those strategies that I were coding were based on moving averages, were based on trend lines, were based on Bollinger Bands and the mixture of all those. Point being, they're all based on indicators, which play a big role in technical analysis along with support and resistance. Plotting that programmatically, though, that's a little advanced. So just looking at indicators. You don't even have to build your own. Your broker software has these indicators built right in. And you can ask that generative AI, hey, which indicator should I use to build this simple strategy? The moving average strategy already tells you you're using moving averages. So that right there, it kind of solves it all. You have 2 moving averages that you can use right off the get-go, and you're off to the races. Now, for backtesting and forward testing, for starters, you don't even, if you limit yourself to then taking whatever you got out of your generative AI solution and using that in your broker supplied software, you're not going to have to worry about building a backtesting engine, which is what our last podcast episode was about. This one here, we're talking on just how to implement it for newbie, right? Your broker software has that already built in, and you don't have to know really any of the jargon that goes with it. You just have to understand how to read the data that comes out of it. And that's stuff that we get into here, what metrics you're looking for. That's a little bit beyond the scope of this podcast episode, but that's how you start getting yourself conditioned to using a data-driven model for trading. Now, after that, let's go through a 5-step process here on how to develop your own simple quant strategy. So we said we're going to use generative AI to develop this strategy. So we're going to say, okay, we're going to first, generative AI, you can ask it this, but but you should probably know the answer to this one before you go sit down to it. You should not go new because truth be told, generative AI still produces a lot of what are called hallucinations, which is just false information. So you need to be able to verify some of the information it gives you. For this first few steps, that's why I'm saying you need to be familiar enough with what you're about to do to not rely on it. So choosing a market and a time frame, depending on how much money you have for trading, will help inform which market you have available to you. If you're looking at something below $25,000 under the pattern day trader rules of how many trades you can take per week. So that may inform, if you're going to be trading a day trading strategy or something that trades within a week in and out, then you're going to be limited as to what you can use. If you're using futures, depending on your broker, you may need less capital than more capital. And then lastly, there's Forex, which you can have fairly small account sizes for Forex. But then the challenge comes is how many brokerages are going to allow you to trade algorithmically. And it's not so much allow you, but have a robust enough platform for you to be able to trade algorithmically. MetaTrader is a very popular software package that lets you connect to different brokers and trade algorithmically. I don't like MetaTrader. There's a lot of people that are fanatics about it, but I invite you to take a look at it and see if it's more your speed. It uses a plus variant or a class on C++ in order to code the strategies. C++ is a programming language. It is considered a high-level language. I started coding in C back in college. I don't consider any C language easy for a newer trader. So that's why I don't think it's a great platform to start on. I think the interface is a little clunky and dated. But if that's what you've got and that's what you want to trade on the Forex markets, then that's available to you. But there are other tools out there. Your broker may have a platform that already has a programming language associated with it, and your generative AI is going to be able to code on that. But in choosing your market, take into account how much money you've got and where your interests lie. Now, next is you're going to want to be able to define your exit entry rules. So this is going to be, you're going to tell generative AI, hey, this is the market I want. I want to code a strategy in this market. This is my goal. Let's say it's day trading or swing trading, and I want to do a moving average crossover. Okay, you're going to say whenever the fast moving average crosses over the slow moving average, I want to go long. That means you want to take a bullish position, you want to buy. Conversely, whenever that moving average crosses back under the slow moving average, then I want to close the position. If there's a position there's no open positions, then I want to short the market at that point, meaning taking a bearish position. Then you tell that to your generative AI solution. It will give you the code that is going to execute that strategy. Your next step here within that, we're still in step 2 in defining your exit and entry rules, is go ahead now and say, hey, generative AI, explain to me line by line at whatever grade level you're comfortable with. Tell it 8th grade level, 5th grade level, whatever you're comfortable with. Explain this code at that grade level to me line by line. And that's one way, yes, to learn coding, but really it's you are hiring generative AI right now as a software engineer. So you want it to verify to you what it just coded and what the strategy actually is. You get to learn the strategy, you get to see what the code means, but you get to be sure that it actually did what you asked it to do. So once you're content with that, you're going to take and copy that code and go back to your broker software and paste it in whatever editor they have available for you. And your next step is going to be to backtest that strategy. In several different software packages, this is 2 different features. In TradeStation and in NinjaTrader, again, not sponsoring this podcast at all, but they're the 2 that I have the most experience with. TradeStation has an editor where you input your code, and that is separate from the backtesting one. Same is true for NinjaTrader. So you want to learn you can ask generative AI, hey, how do I paste this into my broker platform, and tell it which one you have, and it should give you step-by-step instructions on how to do that. But again, you want to put that in your editor, make sure it compiles if that's what your broker requires, and then once it's saved and in there, you now do backtest it. Go into that other feature. You can ask generative AI, hey, on this platform, how do I backtest? And it will give you a step-by-step instruction on how to get that done. Then you want to see what the performance of that strategy is, right? And if that strategy seems sound to you, then the first numbers may not be great numbers, but if it seems sound and something that you can work with, you can usually take either a screenshot of the metrics of the results of that backtest, put that image into your generative AI and say, hey, this is what resulted from this strategy, and then tell it what you wanted to optimize and tweak. That's your next step, which is optimize for risk management. Generative AI does an amazing job at helping you do this with one big caveat, right? And I've used generative AI for this kind of expedite my workflow, only to find that you really have to watch it like a hawk, because what it can over optimize the strategy for you. It can say, hey, you need to change and update all these things. I'd say at first, just follow his instructions. Just do as it says. And with it, you're going to get a handle on how this process works. I think it's a good exercise to know how to tweak the different parameters. You may have to copy and paste new code into your editor and then backtest again, just to see how that all plays out. But ultimately, what you want to do this after a couple of iterations, you want to take that and go into the final step, which is have it trade live data, not live money, live data, meaning in simulation. And what you want to see is how does it perform on real data. If you listen too much to generative AI, what I suspect is going to happen is that it's going to start failing. Even though you had a very successful backtest in generative AI, what probably happened is that you overtrained the data. That's what I find that generative AI has done for me anytime I've asked for its help in optimizing a strategy. It's not true 100% of the time. What you want to gain out of that, the experience you want to gain out of that, is understanding at what point am I crossing the line with generative AI, or is generative AI crossing the line into just having you tweak too much, right? And you can even ask generative AI, hey, I think you're overfitting the data, and see what it tells you. I think the experience of taking it then finally to a live market, again, not live money. Think, if you're listening to this podcast and specifically, I'm talking about you're saying no code, low code, you're relatively new to quants trading, you want to just get started. Do not use live market data, live funds for this. I don't think that's responsible. First, just get a hold of just what's happening. That's the goal of this. Just understand the process. And you want to understand where the process breaks down. That's because that's ultimately when you're going to know when to intervene to make things go right again. So with that, that's how you can get yourself to quant trading today. I think it's so much easier than any other time in history. I've had the benefit that I've got an economics degree as my undergraduate degree. I've got a master's in accounting. I've worked a lot with computers. I'm an IT project manager. I've done software development. So I've been around code since I've been in high school, and I've been in AP classes in high school for programming, done from Pascal to C. So by the time that I started getting into coding my own strategies, I had enough of a foundation that I could do it on my own. Well, a lot of you out there may not have that foundation. And what we just walked through here is how we live in such a wonderful time that you can ask a computer how to do things with itself, right? Like how to code something. And I think that's really where you should understand how to leverage that to your benefit. And that's one of the many things we do here at the Independent Quant, is helping newer traders get their feet wet into what I think is the best starting method to get into trading, which is using quantitative, systematic, algorithmic strategies, right? It's strategies that are data-driven. It removes a lot of the emotional challenges that makes trading difficult, which is where I started when I first started trading. It was systematic, but I had to learn how to control my psychology and my emotions, and that's still very much a thing within quantitative trading, but the barrier to entry is a little lower, and you've got all these resources now that ease the learning curve. I had a steep learning curve, but I had the foundation to help me. even without you not having the foundation, the learning curve is not as steep because you have a lot of help. You have it in that generative AI, and you also have it here at the Independent Quant. So if all that sounds intriguing to you, please do sign up for our newsletter at theindependentquant.com. Look at our course offerings. We do have a mini course on just getting a 30,000 foot view of what quantitative trading is and a much more deeper analysis on how to get started. And if you're ready to do the deep dive, we do have a how to develop your first algo in under 30 days. So with that, just head on over and sign up, and I look forward to seeing you at our next podcast. This is Luis. Keep it green.